Hi there, this is Representative Becca White and Representative
Jim Masland from Thetford.
Yep, and I'm from Hartford, and you're joining us for another episode of Common Ground, which is a production through CATV, where we bring together Vermont state representatives and our New Hampshire state representative friends to build a common ground around legislative topics and all sorts of different political items that people in the Upper Valley might want to learn about. So Today
we're going to talk about the House versus the Senate. Versus is probably wrong.
The House and.
Although, while I'm on that topic, Peter Welch, who's now our congressman, used to joke a couple of times when he was Senate pro tem in the Vermont Senate that the governor is the opposition, but the enemy is the Senate.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we have fantastic ideas, and the Senate messes them up, I swear.
Every time.
But, and they say the same of us. But anyway, we're going to talk about how the House and Senate work together, the differences between the two bodies, the two chambers, and we're looking forward to having our New Hampshire legislative colleagues back again because their arrangement is somewhat different. They have a different government structure. The executive council that we would like to hear them tell us about, because we don't have that in Vermont, but we do have the House and Senate, as nearly all of our 50 states do, and we'd like to discuss those. And I'll start, I guess, by saying, similar to the U.S. Congress, the House is the people's house. Mm-hmm. There are 150 of us. When the Vermont legislature was first formed, there was a representative for every town and city, and that was like 256 or some. Crowded, very crowded floor, and it was pared down, a good number of decades ago to 150. And the problem with the 256, one per town, was Burlington had one representative, and Tinmouth had one representative, and so the little teeny towns could gang up and outvote the cities basically on almost any issue, and it was constitutionally unfair. It was certainly not one man, one vote, one woman, one vote. Now we have 150, and each legislator represents approximately 4,100 people, something like that.
Yeah, and what's interesting about you and I is that we're both in 2-member districts.
Correct.
So we have slightly larger districts population-wise than what the average 1-seat person would have. And that's, at least, there's arguments for and against the idea of 2-member districts, as we saw in redistricting this year. But I know I've really appreciated it as a House member because it gives Hartford at least a voice. And we have a good division of who's connecting with what constituents for Representative Coach Christie for me.
And you have twice as many constituents for a 2-member district.
So it makes a big difference.
Same for Tim Briglin and I. Yeah. We have twice as many constituents. Yeah. We feel we serve them very well, and the redistricting ended up, at least for us, with the same districts.
Yeah, very similar over here. And when we look at the House districts, what has always intrigued me is, even though we might have regional friends that we work with, like I know we work closely with our other Windsor County representatives, when we all sit on the floor, we're all mixed up geographically. Right. So it's really interesting to be on the House floor and to have someone from almost every single town, it feels like, even though we don't have that 256, but you do get a really wide variety of people serving from all across the state, which is, I think, a very special part of the House.
Right. Unlike the U.S. Congress, their House, we could say, is similar to our House, although there's 400 and whatever there are of them. The senators in the U.S. Congress are 2 per state.
Yes.
And that was an agreement reached when the U.S. Constitution was written. We could go into that, but maybe that's a long-winded discussion for today. In Vermont, the Senate, they started out on a county basis.
Yeah.
They're still nominally county basis, and it is also nominally one vote, one constituent in terms of proportionality. But they refer to themselves as, like, for instance, right now, Mark McDonald, my senator, is the senator from Orange County. Chittenden County has up until just now 6. Mm-hmm. It's a big county Senate, and that is, I believe, being pared down to 2 3-member districts. Northeast Kingdom is, their Senate districts are going to be a little different. Maybe we'll talk about that in the fall if we get to that. But it's on a county basis. It's not on a state basis.
And it's different for us than what I think most states experience too with the Senate, where we don't have a county governance structure.
Not at all.
So when you look at the senators, especially from Windsor County, and with redistricting now, your community has been added to the Windsor County Senate District, it does seem a little more flexible for redistricting because we don't have that overlap of county governance.
Another difference, I'm interested to hear what they do in New Hampshire, but in our House chamber, we pick our own our own seats on the floor.
Yeah.
I've been in the same seat for the duration. I'm entitled to stay there if I want to.
First dibs.
But in the Senate, they seat basically by county.
Yes.
Their seats are called out before they get there.
And it's, you can see where I am on the floor. I'm right in that front row, and when I think about you, you're kind of over behind me. Yeah. But where I sit is a whole different wing of people, and then you go into this. Yeah, I've got a fun little area for me. Yeah. They put me in the progressive neighborhood. Each part of the floor has neighborhoods, and I'm in the progressive neighborhood, although I am a Democrat. And when you go into the Senate, it is like everyone has their geographical counterparts right there. Another difference that we talked about before we were starting to film is some of the decorum differences between the House and the Senate. And it's always intrigued me when you go on the floor of the House, I'm chugging away, writing notes or doing emails. If we're discussing something that I might feel that I already have enough information on, or I'm texting to make sure, okay, who's going next to speak on what.
That's correct.
But then you go over to the Senate, and they don't do that.
They don't allow. In the House chamber, we most of us have laptops or iPads open throughout the discussion because we read bills as we go through the discussion. We read amendments. And I find that actually very helpful. Yeah. Before the advent of the sort of electronic devices, we couldn't do that. My first seatmate was Dick Mallory, fantastic individual, who'd have on his desk open copies of the current version as introduced. He had a very remarkable career. But anyway, he'd been there from even before. I think before they went from 256 to...
he was there at the...
250. Anyway, so his habit, his modus operandi was to read the original bill, read the amendments, make note of the changes, and frequently would ask to interrogate the speaker, whoever was speaking, not Speaker of the House, the member presenting a bill on why did you do this or why did you do that. Yeah. Anyway, so the Senate makes do their way, and we make do our way.
You can't even... I ran into Senator Clarkson, who had the opportunity to be leading the body on either Thursday or Friday because the lieutenant governor and the pro tem were not going to be in the chamber. Right. And I said, should I try to sneak a photo of you to take? And she said, you can't even bring a camera in here. So you could maybe get through like the glass into that green room.
And you mentioned the lieutenant governor.
Yes.
All states, to the best of my knowledge, have lieutenant governors, and the constitutional description of the duties of the lieutenant governor to preside over the Senate.
Yes.
That's it. They preside over the Senate. Many lieutenant governors use that position as a platform for things that they think we ought to be doing or that they want to tell us about or tell the world about. Vermont agriculture, for example, has been an example, or affordable housing. Howard Dean made affordable housing his his bailiwick when he was lieutenant governor. But the lieutenant governor doesn't have any other specific role. The role is what they make of it.
Completely.
And during this this last year, when we had COVID shut us all down, there wasn't much opportunity for many of us, particularly the lieutenant governor, to express what it was Molly Gray, was really good at. There wasn't an opportunity to do that, which was unfortunate, but that's the way it goes. So we have, and I believe they do in New Hampshire, they have a speaker. We elect our speaker.
In the House.
In the House, that's correct. The speaker presides over the floor debate, the discussion, and whatnot. The speaker in the Vermont legislature is actually a fairly important, powerful individual who makes all the committee appointments, all the chairs, all the vice chairs.
If you're even on a committee, for example, they have the power to, I don't know the exact terminology, but take you off of a committee.
There was a member 2 years ago, member from Brownington, who was removed from the Ways and Means Committee and not given another committee assignment for some very unfortunate behavior, I guess you could say. But it was appropriate, I think, that she lost her committee assignment, and that's a discussion for another day. Anybody who's listening in who wants to ask about that, I'm glad to discuss it. But
lots of power in that position.
There's lots of power in that position. Yeah. So it's different. The lieutenant governor does not have that power in Vermont or in any other state that I'm aware of. And in the Senate, appointments are made to committees by the Committee on Committees, I guess, which is lieutenant governor serves on that, the pro tem, and certain other, I'm not sure exactly the makeup, and we can get a senator on here someday and they can tell us, but appointments are made slightly differently.
Yes.
But appointments are appointments, and as you and I discussed before we began filming, in the House we have one committee.
Yes. We get one, you go to it throughout the day, that's your focus.
And we believe we dig into issues, whether they're policy or money, and are very thorough in our work. The Senate, they get, because there's less of them, and there's an awful lot 30. Of ground to cover, right, 30 versus 150, they get two committees, what they call a morning committee and an afternoon committee, and in some ways, it's the makeup House and Senate is very fortunate because we work very hard on something. We pass it over to the Senate, and they go through the same process again. Sometimes, as I've suggested, they mess up our work. But in other cases, by the time we get into April, for example, they've got new information on financing, money, the budget, things that have come up, and they can make sensible modifications to the work that we do. And so what we pass out at the end of the session for the governor to sign is a better developed bill. In most cases that's true. But they do have different ideas on how we're going to spend our money.
Yes.
Those are the principal disagreements that we face, that we will in the next month or so.
And do you, in my experience over the last 4 years, what I've appreciated is that, so the House tends to have the second and third floor. That's our area where our committee rooms are. Right. And then even it's a little different now with COVID and how we've reorganized ourselves with larger spaces. But the Senate kind of has the run of the first floor in that wing.
They do.
And I appreciate when we have lunchtime or we've got pockets of time where we can run into each other. Sure. It's so interesting to just hear the different interpretations of the same piece of legislation just a few weeks apart.
Yep. A few weeks apart.
Yeah.
What are they doing now? Oh, they learned something, and it does actually make sense.
Yeah, every now and again. And it's important for us to be able to connect with our senators.
It's worth mentioning that the latter frequently is from the House to the Senate. And I don't know very many people have chosen, unless they get voted out of office and they choose, through some circumstances or something, they end up coming to the House. But in Ways and Means, which was a powerful committee, they say it's a money committee.
I agree.
I've worked with Carolyn Brannigan, who was representative from Georgia and then senator from up there. David Zuckerman was formerly in Ways and Means. Keisha Ram was formerly in Ways and Means. Allison Clarkson, formerly in Ways and Means. It's a good place to learn the trade, I guess you could say. And I wonder why on earth people leave the House and want to join the Senate. So maybe this is an opportunity just to slip this in. Becca, you're going to run for the Senate from the Windsor County Senate.
Yes.
So tell us, why on earth would you leave the House and want to join the Senate? What's the draw?
Goodness. Well, Jim, I would say, so as you know, I've been in the House for the last 4 years, and it's interesting because I actually originally considered running for the Windsor County Senate 6 years ago. And that's because I have always reflected on the way the Senate acts on regional issues.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm from White River Junction, as you know, and White River Junction and Hartford is a bit of a microcosm for the larger county.
Yeah.
So whether it's developing our downtown, or we have a very rural part of our community, we have our little ski area in Quechee. We've got all the different things that Windsor County has kind of in a smaller microcosm.
And you've got a lot of business, a lot of commerce.
Yeah, we got...
Which that's where Vermont grows, whether we like it or not sometimes.
I mean, entrepreneurship is huge.
Is a big time thing.
Yeah.
It's very important to us. Did I mention Senator Clarkson too?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
So, yeah, and for Windsor County, we have currently 3 senators, and that didn't change with redistricting.
Right.
Although if folks are in Windsor County now and they're wondering if they still are with redistricting, we added Thetford.
Right.
We took away Rochester, that's now part of Addison County, and then Mount Holly and Londonderry are now a part of their respective counties. They're more traditional counties.
And to put an explainer in here, that's because population has shifted. Vermont's population has actually been relatively static over the last 10 years, but some counties have grown in population, and some counties have, relatively speaking, lost population. And in order to make it fair, one constituent, one vote, every 10 years we do reapportionment. People may have been following in the news, and so my town, Thetford, is it's geographically in Orange County as far as the Senate district comes. It's part of Windsor County, and Mark McDonald is now not part of Orange County anymore as a senator, and we'll just have to see how the voting turns out. The dynamic changes when population changes, and some towns are very favorable to one senator or not, and others less so, and so time marches on, but that's the way it is. That's fair.
Yeah, and I think one other point to make, and then I'd love to move on to talk about a little bit more on the morning and afternoon committee angle. But for me, one of the reasons why I chose to run for the Senate was because of some of the demographics. And I think your point is really well taken, where folks tend to kind of stay in the House or do local government, then the House, and then the Senate. That's kind of the stepping stones people take. And that tends to lead to having a older population of folks in the Senate. And for me, when I was looking at considerations on running, that was a key component, was concerns that we weren't seeing as many folks below the age of 65 being there's nothing wrong with that age group, but it's nice to have a bit of a diversity of ages and people. So that was an important piece to me. And something that is interesting about the Senate that attracted me was because of the morning and afternoon committees, you do get to have a wider perspective on different issues. And I love being on the transportation committee, but it can feel a little bit like you're keyholed into one topic. And I appreciate that the senators get the opportunity to weigh in on different items.
Well, and that's true, and I appreciate your your age distinction, your age qualification. No, it makes good sense.
I mean, as two 20-somethings, we really have to.
I'm a 20-something. Now?
Now I'm just.
Anyway, but I can also say we have a lot of outstanding young members in the.
I think we do.
In the House.
I think we do.
Bright too.
I tend to.
Absolutely.
As the co-chair of the Futures Caucus, I do hope a few of us are bright.
Oh yeah, quite bright. Quite bright. No doubt about it. So, so what else should we chat about?
Well, I think it would be important to talk about. We had talked about before the money bills angle of it and how they tend to start in the House. And one thing that's different about when we make a decision, if it votes out of the House, it goes to the Senate, then it comes back. There's something called committees of conference or conference committees. I'd love to spend some time on that because I did not know those existed.
Okay, so that's a good point. As you said, money bills start in the House. I believe I know it's the way it is in the U.S. Congress, and I believe it's in all the states. It is said that because there are far more people proportionately in all the houses versus the Senate's, is that we're the people's house. And money bills, if we're going to spend your money, the people ought to have a say in the origin of money bills and how they're developed. And that's exactly what we do. Yes. All the budgets start in the House, and the taxes and fees bills start in the House.
The transportation
budget. So then what happens when we disagree?
Yes.
When we pass a bill over to the Senate, and they pass it back, and there is a difference, the first look at the Senate's bill is the Committee of Jurisdiction, wherever it came from. If it's a tax bill, it comes back to Ways and Means. And we talk about what the Senate did or didn't do. And in almost all cases, we disagree. We tell the Speaker, our chair will stand up on the floor or someone and said we disagree with the Senate's version, and we ask that a committee of conference be appointed. Yes. What is that? The committee of conference is 3 members of the House, frequently from the Committee of Jurisdiction, where the bill originated. Sometimes one other member comes in from another committee, and 3 members from the Senate, and they meet in a open session. I mean, this is all open. All our work is open. In a room on a schedule as best that they can work out. And I present this. You present that. What are we going to do with that? What of our bill can you accept? What of your bill do we agree with?
What's the negotiation line? And what will you give up for?
Right, and there's a negotiation back and forth. It's above board. There is some strategy involved. I've watched it develop over the years.
And you've been on a conference committee?
Conference, not so much in money bills, but when I was in natural resources, I was frequently in committees of conference.
Okay.
And ultimately, so your 3 senators and my 3 House members, we come to an agreement. Yep. Sometimes it takes a while to close a committee of conference. Sometimes we have to get things to happen in other committees.
Yes.
In order to
make the
blocks assemble into the correct place. That's the best analogy I could use. And when we're in agreement, we may wait to close ours until appropriations close something.
Yes.
There's money moving back and forth. We have to agree, or there are some very policy-heavy bills in education. We can talk about that some. But anyway, when they close, 3 representatives sign, 3 senators sign, hopefully all sign. They have to have at least 2 on each. And someone stands up on the floor, the chair of the committee of conference, and Madam Speaker, we've come to an agreement on this, that, and the other, and you'll find it on House agenda of today. You can find it in the House agenda. You can see it word for word, or since, as we said, we work on.
You got it on your laptop.
You can read it right in front of you.
Yep.
And typically speaking, when committees of conference close, then that's it.
That's it.
Once in a while,
That's all she
there's
wrote.
still a disagreement.
Once in a while. Yeah.
Well, occasionally, and sometimes someone will, a member will say, we were unable to reach an agreement.
Yes.
And the Speaker and the Senate Pro Tem will appoint a new committee of conference, which may be the same with one member changed or something.
I have not seen that in my time yet.
I've seen it a couple of times.
Okay. Something to look forward to maybe as we get close to the end of the session.
But anyway, so that's what occurs. House members and Senate members agree on the final version of a bill. Both House and Senate have to pass the exact same bill. And then it's messaged to the governor.
Yes.
It goes to the governor, and the governor has, I believe it's 10 days, or maybe it's 10 working days. It may be different. But anyway, a fixed amount of time that the governor, he or she, signs the bill or sends it back.
Or just
veto.
doesn't do anything and it passes without a signature.
Right, that can be done. That has happened recently on some firearm bills, some gun bills. But anyway, so it's a fascinating process. It can be for a new member somewhat bewildering the last week or so.
Oh, complete fire hose. What's going on? Everything's changing all at once.
And we work late
Very late
into the night sometimes. For what it's worth, there have been once or twice in my 24 years when we've had a bat in the House chamber.
There was a bat my first year.
Yeah. But they find their way out eventually. And we figure it out.
Well, as we start to wrap up the episode, I think it might be important to tell folks when they're interested in an issue, for example, let's say they live in your district or my district, they have us that they can come to as their House reps. But if it's an issue that the Senate will also be taking up or starts in the Senate, I oftentimes get folks who will say, I've heard about S ... and I need you to vote on it. I look, we aren't looking at it. It's not coming over to the House. And I'm sure our senators get it vice versa. So I don't know if you have a recommendation for folks who are trying to advocate.
Well, sometimes I go online, because that's the easiest way to do it, read the bill and find out that it hasn't, the Committee of Jurisdiction hasn't taken it up.
Yeah.
So sometimes people are pleased about that. Don't worry, it hasn't gone anywhere. It's too late. It's not gonna. But there are other issues that I have some people who I've been working with from other areas, other parts of the state, who are interested in a particular issue, that are very upset that House Judiciary finally hasn't done this or anything of that. So what are they going to do something about? And sometimes I say, as is frequently true, there isn't a sufficient coalition behind it, interest behind it, even if it's important to you and me, in order to get a committee to take it up, take the time. So as you can tell, there's a lot more to discuss.
Yes.
And I'm sure, I hope anyway, that the more we tell the audience, the more they want to know more about something, and we're happy to do that.
We are.
And so
that's it, folks.
Becca,
and we learned about the House and the Senate.
And the Senate.
So thanks for watching.
Okay, see you next time. Bye.